Everybody, Scout Crafty here again. It's Monday, Mishmash Monday. Got a lot to talk about today, and if you notice in the background, we have some good news, some new things coming up in the next week or two, and you're gonna love it. Okay, we're back down the shop. I'm pretty excited today to be back down here, and like I said, we had a couple big thunderstorms roll through here. I love a thunderstorm. You know, there's something about it. It's just it's a lot, especially when I don't have those trees to worry about crashing down on my house. So it was a little more enjoyable this time, but it was nice and gives a lawn a good soaking. And so I'm looking forward to that. Couple new things to talk about, like I was telling you before. One thing is I decided on putting up a flagpole. Yes, I'm going to put up a flagpole in the middle of the lawn, because my patriotism cannot go far enough. So, you know, I will have the one on the house, and then I will have one in the middle of the lawn. I'm going to be using probably plumbing pipe, maybe 2.5 inches down to maybe 1.7 inches, something like that. And just not a tall one, maybe 20 feet tall, but it's going to be nice right in the middle of the lawn. So that I'm looking forward to. Going to pick up that project pretty soon. And I got another project that's being worked on now that if you had good eyes, you could pick it out in the background. And and I will talk about that when they are finished, which will be probably this week or so. So everything's going good. So let's see what we got planned for today. Okay, remember last week when we did this lantern, I was trying to come up with the bulb. This is the bulb that was in there. Remember, it was broken, but it just turns out that I found out what kind of bulb it was. Now, you know, we can convert this to all different types of bulbs because it has kind of a bayonet mount on here, which isn't too unusual. But the problem is you don't want to draw a lot of current, you know, and a lot of the bulbs that are meant for automobiles, they draw a lot of current, you know, like if you ever look at you can always tell by looking at the filament, and you look at those filaments for taillights and stuff, they're big, heavy-duty filaments, and they draw a lot of current. They wouldn't last but a couple hours, you know, the batteries be dead. So you have to get something that doesn't draw a lot. And the bulb that originally came with this was called a Mazda 1491. And that's because it was a 2.4 volt bulb. And now this is what you'll find amazing, that the two batteries that came in here were standard number 6 dry cells. They look like these old-fashioned batteries. They're long and tall, and they you can still get them today, but they're 1.5 volts each. And so when you run them in series, you get 3 volts, and 3 volts is what would power. So here's what's confusing to a lot of people. Here we have a typical, you know, the typical battery flashlight. And you know that this flashlight here uses 2 D cells. And D cells are 1.5 volts each. So if you add them up, because you have 1.5 and 1.5, that's 3 volts, right? But all these bulbs on these old flashlights were all 2.4 volts. So you say, wait a minute, 2.4 volts, and you're putting 3 volts. Aren't you going to shorten the life of the bulb? Aren't you going to burn it out, you know, just by turning it on? And, you know, that's where it gets confusing. In a normal case, you would say, yeah, that's what would happen. But because of its being direct current and using batteries, they're saying that the resistance of the batteries when you turn it on and going through the wires and everything, that it drops down, and it after a couple seconds it doesn't matter and it won't damage the bulb. So if you notice, all your, you know, if you would think you would need a 3 volt bulb for this, but they're all 2.4, and for 6 volt lantern batteries they use a 4.6 or 4.8 volt bulb. So that's something that's confusing. But once you understand it, which, you know, I guess we kind of understand it, it makes sense. Speaking of those bulbs, we are going to tackle this project first. This is a 1970s Scout light, and it is all plastic. It is nothing like the Bridgeport we did last month, but you can see it's all plastic, and it has had its use. But we're going to do a quick cleanup, disassembly, take it apart, clean it up, put it back together, and see if we can get this to work. Okay, here we have it all disassembled. You can see here it's all plastic and tin, but, you know, no rust or anything. And so we'll put this together. It's a little bit, we'll see if we can clean this up. I always like that red clear plastic SOS momentary switch they had on here. And the reflector looks pretty good. And the only problem is the lens is scratched up. It's plastic. We'll polish this out and see what we can do. Now remember what we were talking about before. There's 2.4 volts. And that's a 0.5 amp. You see that? 1.05 amperes, 2.4 volts, and that's what you can see, that little filament in there. And hopefully this bulb will work. Everything looks good, but this is what all those, if you put a 3-volt bulb in, apparently it would be very dim. We're calling this project done, cleaned up nice. It's a beautiful little flashlight. Again, this is when they were making pretty decent products. You know, you can see here that the lens came out nice. It works beautifully. You can see here, nice and bright, right? Very bright. When you push it up one click and you use the red button, that's how you activate the signal device. Push it up a second click and that's it. Very lightweight flashlight, cleaned up, polished up nice. It's just a nice little tribute to back then when these were the cheaper ones, what most parents would have bought instead of the more expensive. Okay, next up, my good buddy Ben Mall from down in beautiful Texas. God bless Texas. He told me, he asked me, he said, you know, John, could you show me a little bit about when you wax it? And I'll tell you why he came up with this question. It's a very good question, because a lot of times when you apply wax to a tool, if you don't do it in such a way, it can almost make it look cloudy and take away some of the sheen. It's more difficult than waxing a car, actually. And let me show you what I do to try and, you know, get away from leaving that haze on the tool. Now, the wax I use all the time is I use Mother's California Gold Carnauba Cleaner Wax. This is fantastic stuff. Can you smell it? Oh, this stuff. And I thought I was buying a new replacement for this at one time, and I bought this. I thought it could, you know, I saw the red. I bought it in a heart. It's McGuire's. It's not the same. And it doesn't have the same smell, but I never tried it yet. But I'm saying, oh, geez, I meant to buy the Mother's, and I bought this. So anyway, what we have to do is on these scissors that we did, I did the front here, but I never did the handles, because the handles have to dry at least a week before you do anything to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to wax the handles, which I always like to put a coating on. It just gives a nice feel to it, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. Now, what I use is a kind of what's called like a shop towel. They sell these. This one's the white. Sometimes they come in the blue, but the white ones are real nice if you can get them. I cut a little piece off and I dampened it. And when I say dampened it, what I do is I run it under water and then I squeeze it out so there's no more water, so it's just slightly damp. Now that's your application swatch. I take my California Gold, I add some wax to it here, not too much. A little bit goes a long way here. I'm going to separate the scissors a little bit. Okay, try not to, here we go. Try to drop it. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put a very light coating on here. Now, when I say a light coating, I'm telling you, just applying the wax, and you're not doing any kind of rubbing or anything like that. If you have some steel and you want to get a little bit of a polish, because this has cleaners in it, you would do that. But here I'm just applying the wax because I want it as a coating. So I'm putting it all over the black, and you can see it's going to dull it out. And now here's the key. Here's the important part. This is real time, because this is what Ben asked for. Now, how long do you wait? You see, you make sure everything should look dull. And that's how you know you have everything covered, right? When you have everything covered like that, everything's dull, you just let it sit for a couple seconds. Now, the key is you can't let it sit too long. You remember the old days? I know a lot of guys are going to be laughing. We used to wax our car, right? The worst thing you could possibly do is wax your entire car and then go to take the wax off, because then where you started, where you put the wax on, that was like rock. You couldn't get it off. Remember, with especially the old Simonizer stuff, there was a specific amount of time between putting it on and taking it off. And if you went too far, you never got it off. So now what you want to wait for, this is going to turn into like almost like a powdery, you won't be able to move it around. See, it's already dry here, but here it's still a little bit, I got a little thick, but you just give it a couple seconds, and then what you're going to do, using that shop cloth, is you're going to buff it off. See, now you don't want to wait till it's, rock hard dry, and then when you're taking it off, I'm going to show you here. See that? Look at that. You're going to take it off. You're just going to gently, because if you wait too long, that's when you have the problem. And you're going to keep rotating this cloth and take that wax off there. And give it if you build up a little bit of heat when you're rubbing it, you can see what happens. It comes up. And let me show you what the rest looks like. Okay, so with all this done, you could see here now, it first of all, it feels 100% better wax like that, but you could see how it added that just extra level of depth and gloss to it. And again, they're not made to, to look flawless because they were kind of casted, but it's about the feel. It's when you pick them up and put them in your hand, it just feels so much nicer. And again, it'll always wipe clean. It's good for protection, but it's the key. The key is two things. Number one, don't put it on too thick. Very light with a damp cloth, because the water in the cloth is helping to spread that out. So put it on real thin, and also buff it off real quick. And again, this is the one I prefer, the Mother's California Gold. This stuff is fantastic. Anyway, hope that helps. Last week we also talked about the files and the file handle thing with me. But Brian Davum asked a really good question, and he said, how can you tell when your file needs to be replaced? And that's a great question, because a lot of us have always had the same file since we're kids, and you don't know what a sharp file is like until you accidentally come across one. Okay, as crazy as it sounds, I know when you're looking at, is there an official way? How can you tell if they're actually sharp or if they just, I'll tell you how, this is, again, kind of an old-timey trick, but here is a fairly new file. This is a Baco. It's a good quality file. I know my buddy Ben knows about Baco. Anyway, when you grab this file, it almost, it feels like, if you work with your hands, if you're ever trying to run your hand across the nylon like a stocking or something, it kind of grips. It's the same thing with this file. This file, you'll feel it gripping every part. The edges, especially the edges along the file here, will feel super sharp. Not sharp that's going to cut you, but you could feel it gripping your skin. Every part of your fingerprint is getting caught up on that. And here's one here. It's an old Nicholson USA. It's a Mill Bastard file, and you can see here Nicholson USA, and you can see here now the edges here, this is a little bit more worn than here, but you can see it's still catching, still somewhat sharp, not quite as sharp as this one, but you can still feel it. Now, how you can tell like a worn one, like here's one, this is I don't have too many worn files, but this one here you can see has a lot of wear around this area here. It was probably filing in here. You can see now, you got to make sure when you're feeling a file to see if it's sharp, that's not clogged up. See, it might be this. I was filing some brass or something here, and you can see there's some clog in here. So what you do is you take a file card, and what a file card is, it's just a brush that is meant to clean files, and you go along with the grain of the file, and you just try and get rid of some of that, that brass or whatever might be clogging it up, and then you could feel it. There's also a pin back here. You see this little pin? You pull that pin out, and a lot of times with some thicker files, especially if somebody's filing a soft material like aluminum, which you're not supposed to, you have to puck out that little piece of metal that might have gotten in there, clogged in there, and take it out of there. Because if not, that'll actually scrape your work as you're using it. So these are old Colton number 10 file cleaner. If you see one of these at the flea market, pick them up. They're really good to have. But I have a bunch they still make file cards, but that one is particularly nice. So that's how I find, just by feel. You can almost tell it, and of course when you're using a file, if you're not taking off the material, you should be. But I'm saying when you go to buy one, you could tell right away by just feeling it if it's, if it was abused or, the edges, things like that. That's one other thing I would urge you to do, if you ever go to a steam engine show or a flea market or something, and you see a new old stock file in a box, they used to come wrapped up in a box, or anywhere, take that file out of the box, whether you're interested in buying it or not, take it out and run your hands and feel what it feels like. Because unless you've felt a new file, it's hard to, to judge. A lot of times you have these files sitting around your house, you don't know what a new clean, and guys that do a lot of filing, that buy and have files, you can actually have files sharpened. Guys that do that, they know the difference between a good file, especially a USA file and a foreign file. They can tell the difference. Me, I'm kind of a butcher, but I can still tell a sharp file. And lastly, never, ever, ever throw a file out. Always just stick them somewhere, put them in a box somewhere, and stick them under the workbench. Never throw, because there's 100 things you could do with a used file. Here is I showed you this a couple weeks ago. Somebody made this great pry bar, and it's good. File is fantastic steel. And you can also make a knife. You can do so many things with a file that when they get worn out, the steel is still good. So don't throw them away. That's good steel. Last up, we got one more project to take care of, and let's get to that right now. Okay, I just want to tackle this real quick because we only got a couple minutes to kill. And you know something? I can't tell you how many people were attracted to this screwdriver when I picked it up, and I was too. It just has such a fantastic handle. I mean, it just calls to you, but it has a little bit of damage you could see around it, little nicks and burrs, and it's a little dull. But let's see if we can't clean this up a little bit and make this, into a nice using screwdriver. Okay, let's get to that. Now I finished up by polishing it up with Meguiar's Plastex polish, great polish. And you know my favorite part. Remember what this screwdriver looked like before we started. And we're calling this project done. This one here, can you see? We polished it out, got it all nice and took all, must have been some Bondo or something in the knurls. I had to pick it out with an X-Acto knife, but it looks good now. It's and this is, I'm very proud of this part up here. You see this area here? This area here was all messed up, and I redid it. I put it in a lathe and turned it down a little bit. Didn't that come out nice? It's and it just something. And of course the blade, I just cleaned it up. I didn't go nuts, and the tip looks good, and it's just a lovely screwdriver. Now you can see it is a translucent. You can see red. It's a nice color. It don't really show up on camera with this, but I was looking at this, I was saying, this reminds me of something. Why do I love this kind of red so much? And I said, you know what? I know why. Who here had a Duncan Imperial? Huh? Who? Did you ever have one of these growing up as a kid, a Duncan Imperial? These were the cat's pajamas, and yeah, that red, that translucent red, it's, this is a little bit darker, but I think that's where I first got my love of that color. So this Great Neck is in the can. So in closing, there we go. We started off the week with a couple projects, a couple subjects to talk about. I hope you have a great week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care now. Bye-bye.